Part 1, the hidden place where God forms the unshakable. No one applauds when God starts working in you. There's no crowd watching.
No spotlight shining. No applause.
Just silence. Silence and what feels like isolation. Yet, it is in this hidden place, this quiet room where no one else sees, that God begins his most powerful work. This is the contradiction that most believers never understand. The greatest moves of God in a person's life don't begin on a platform but in a private furnace. There is a danger in our generation, a craving to be seen before we are made. We want visibility before transformation, impact before obedience, ministry before death to self. But God is not rushed. He has never been interested in using someone before forming them in secret, and his forming often feels like forgetting. God's greatest work in you will not begin when people start noticing your gifts. It will not begin when your name is known or your talents are affirmed. It will begin when you are alone, unseen, and possibly even misunderstood. It will begin when all you have left is him. Oswald Chambers once said, "Before God's message can liberate other souls, the liberation must be real in you." This liberation happens far from the eyes of the public. It happens in the hours of weeping, in the nights of silence, in the prayers that seem unanswered, in the places where you feel hidden and abandoned. And yet, it is there that God is doing his deepest work. Moses spent 40 years in the desert, not because he was being punished, but because he was being formed. David was anointed in front of his family but sent back to the sheepfold. No throne, no audience, just sheep, solitude, and songs to a God only he could hear. Joseph had dreams of influence, but before he ever interpreted a dream for Pharaoh, he was forgotten in a prison. The pattern is consistent throughout Scripture. God hides those he intends to use. He reduces them before he raises them. He wounds before he anoints, because public strength without private surrender is dangerous. A platform without brokenness is a threat to your soul and to others. The secret place is not punishment. It is preparation. And many walk away from their calling not because they weren't gifted, but because they weren't willing to stay hidden until the time was right. They tried to bypass the hidden work of God. They refused the cave. They escaped the desert. They resented the silence. But the silence of God is not always rejection. Often it is refinement. It is where he strips away every identity you've built outside of him. It is where your motives are tested and purified. It is where the applause of heaven becomes more real to you than the approval of men. Many are praying for God to use them, but few are willing to let God undo them first. The undoing always happens in private. It happens when God puts his hand on areas of your life that no one else sees. It's in how you handle bitterness when no one's watching. It's in the thoughts you surrender. It's in the obedience that costs you everything but gains you nothing externally. That's where the deep roots grow. That's where the wells are dug. And one day, when you do stand in public, the weight of your private surrender will carry the weight of the message you preach. We live in a time where visibility is equated with value. But God values what is unseen. That's why Jesus said, "When you pray, go into your room and close the door. Your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." Not just with external things, but with himself. Intimacy with God has always been the reward of private obedience. If you feel forgotten right now, if your prayers feel like whispers into the wind, if your obedience feels like it's leading nowhere, don't rush out of that place. That place might be the very place where God is forming a vessel he intends to trust with his glory. You're not being buried. You're being planted. But growth always begins underground. This is the paradox of surrender. God does his loudest work in the quietest seasons. Not when the crowds are listening, but when no one is watching. Not when you feel strong, but when you are stripped bare. Not when you feel qualified, but when you're painfully aware of your weakness. The question isn't, when will God use me? The question is, will I let him undo me first? Will I stay in the hidden place long enough for his image to be formed in me? Will I surrender not just the bad parts, but even the good ones that get in the way of his will? You see, God is not impressed by our achievements. He's moved by our obedience. And often, that obedience has no immediate reward, no audience,
no affirmation.
Just the slow forming of a heart that says, "Yes, Lord," even when there's nothing in it for me but more silence. If you're in that place now, the private place, the quiet cave, the space of hiddenness, don't despise it. Don't escape it. That may be the holy ground where your real calling is born. Because what God does in you privately is the only thing that can sustain what He wants to do through you publicly. And remember this, no one can take from you what God forms in secret. The private work of God often feels like abandonment. You pray, but heaven is quiet. You obey, but nothing changes. You wait, but the door never opens. In these moments, the temptation is to question everything. Your calling, your worth, even God Himself. But what you may be interpreting as rejection is actually refinement. Because in the desert, God is not absent. He's intentional. He's removing every support that's not Him. Every false identity. Every dependency on people, position, performance. Until your heart learns to beat for Him alone. This is where real faith is formed. Not in the public celebration, but in the private wrestling. This is what made Jacob limp. What caused David to write psalms from a cave? What taught Elijah that God was not in the fire or the earthquake, but in the whisper? The desert strips away the noise so you can finally hear God's voice without interference. It reveals what you truly believe about Him. Do you trust Him only when He answers? Or do you trust Him when He's silent? When His hand withholds, but His heart still burns with love? There's a kind of trust that can only be formed when you have no outcome to cling to. No sign.
No breakthrough.
Just a history with God that whispers, He's still good, even here. That kind of trust is rare, can't be faked, and it can't be produced in crowds. It's built when you're in the wilderness, wondering if He's forgotten your name, and still you choose to say, even if not, I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay with you. God's greatest work in you is to make you fully His. That means breaking your addiction to clarity, removing your need to feel useful, dismantling your obsession with progress. Because usefulness is not the goal, union is. Being close to Him, walking with Him, knowing Him, that's the reward. Everything else is secondary. Oswald Chambers wrote, "The test of a man's religious life is not his ecstasies but his obedience. And obedience in private is the furnace where pure devotion is born. You cannot fake devotion in private. There is no one to impress there. There are no filters.
No applause. No metrics.
Just you and God and whatever truth exists between you. If that space is cold and distant, God will confront it. Not to condemn you, but to heal you. Because He desires all of you. Not just your gifts. Not just your prayers. Not just your time, but your trust. And trust is only revealed when it costs you something. Have you ever noticed that before God entrusted anyone with influence, He first walked them through invisibility? Abraham was called but waited decades to see the promise. Joseph was gifted but forgotten. David was anointed but hunted. Jesus Himself spent 30 years in obscurity for a ministry that lasted 3. The private seasons are not a delay. They are the process. And if you skip them, you will lack the depth to carry the weight of your assignment. God is not building you for now. He's building you for the moment He knows is coming. A moment you can't see yet. A moment of pressure, of responsibility, of spiritual confrontation. And when that moment comes, only the roots you grew in secret will hold you steady. Public charisma will not protect you. Discipline will not be enough. Only the deep knowing of God that was formed in nights of silence, in mornings of surrender, in days of unseen obedience, only that will hold. We want to be used by God, but He wants us to belong to Him first, and that takes time. He'll place you in situations that expose your motives. He'll allow delays that test your endurance. He'll even ordain misunderstandings that strip you of the need to be right. Because surrender isn't about getting it right. It's about giving it up. And private surrender is the foundation of lasting authority. There are things God cannot entrust to someone who still needs affirmation. There are assignments too heavy for hands still holding on to personal dreams. So He strips you, not to harm you, but to free you. He breaks you not to shame you, but to shape you. And he hides you not because he's done with you, but because he's not done yet. Some of God's greatest vessels were formed in seasons where they felt disqualified. They didn't feel anointed. They didn't feel fruitful. They didn't feel strong. But they stayed. They remained faithful. They didn't abandon the altar. They didn't walk away from the secret place. And in that place, God built something in them that the world couldn't see, but heaven celebrated. You might be in that very place right now, tired, questioning, invisible. But don't confuse invisibility with insignificance. Your silence might be the stage where God is preparing his next word through your life. The desert might be your holy ground. The waiting room might be your place of consecration. Don't rush out. Don't look for shortcuts. Stay planted. God waters seeds in secret, and when they break the ground, they carry a strength the surface never gave them. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the specific tests God allows in private seasons. How he tests our motives, obedience, endurance, and even our silence. These are the sacred refinements most never talk about, but they are what make a life usable by God. If God is doing his greatest work in private, then it should be no surprise that the deepest tests of your character also come in private. Not when you're praised, but when you're misunderstood. Not when you feel anointed, but when you feel abandoned. And not when the room is full, but when you're utterly alone. There are 4 types of tests that almost every servant of God walks through before they're truly released into the fullness of their calling. The test of motives, the test of obedience, the test of silence, and the test of endurance. And every one of them happens far from public view, because God is not impressed by performance. He's drawn to purity. And purity is revealed when no one is clapping. The test of motives is brutal. You think you're doing what's right until God starts pressing your heart. He asks questions you didn't think mattered. Why do you serve? Why do you give? Why do you pray? Is it to be seen? To feel holy? To gain favor? Or is it simply because he is worthy? This test happens when your acts of faithfulness no longer produce visible fruit. When no one notices. When there's no reward. And still you show up. Still you choose him. Still you say yes. Because your motive isn't what he gives. It's who he is. The test of obedience is different. It's about following him when it costs you something. Maybe your comfort. Maybe your reputation. Maybe your plans. Obedience in private is the kind that doesn't earn applause. You walk away from that relationship no one told you to end. You give up that opportunity everyone else would have taken. You change course when the Spirit whispers, even though logic says otherwise. And no one understands. But God sees. And in that obedience, he begins to trust you. Because obedience without explanation is the highest form of surrender. Then comes the test of silence. This one breaks many people. God doesn't speak. The heavens feel locked. You ask, but no answers come. You fast, but the breakthrough never shows. You read the word, but nothing stirs. And yet, in that silence, something strange happens. You stop performing. You stop striving. And you start trusting. You learn to rest in who God is, not in what he says. You stop needing signs. You stop demanding confirmation. You simply stay. And that staying becomes worship. That stillness becomes obedience. That silence becomes intimacy. Because now it's not about getting a word. It's about becoming one. Finally, the test of endurance. The long stretch. The years. The seasons that feel like decades. Where nothing changes. Where promises remain unfulfilled. Where prophecies gather dust. And yet, like Abraham, you believe. Like Noah, you build. Like Hannah, you pray. Like Paul, you press on. Because faith is not measured by emotion. It's measured by consistency. And those who endure become those God trusts. Oswald Chambers wrote, "Perseverance is more than endurance. It is endurance combined with absolute assurance that what we are looking for is going to happen. But that kind of assurance is not born in comfort. It is forged in the slow fire of hidden faithfulness. God will not use you publicly until he can trust you privately. And trust is not built in your gifting. It's built in your response to pressure, in your willingness to wait, in your refusal to quit when everything looks dead. When you've buried the dream, when the promises feel like lies, when your name is unknown, your prayers feel unheard, and your soul feels empty, and you still worship. God doesn't call you to be fruitful first. He calls you to be faithful, and that faithfulness must pass through every test before He places weight on your life. Because God is more interested in building your foundation than your platform. And if He withholds the breakthrough, it's not because He's cruel. It's because the weight of what's coming would crush you if your soul wasn't prepared. Think about it. Joseph passed every test of character in private, before he ever interpreted Pharaoh's dream. David refused to kill Saul in the cave, even when he had the chance, because his heart was formed in the wilderness. Jesus Himself endured 40 days in the desert, not to prove His power, but to submit His will. This is the refining fire that comes before the release. And the fire doesn't just reveal impurities, it removes them. So if you're in that fire now, don't pray your way out of it. Invite God to finish His work in you through it. You don't need to rush to be seen. You need to be refined. Because what God does in secret becomes your authority in the open. Not charisma, not performance, but history. And history with God is never built in the spotlight. It's built in silence, in brokenness, in long nights and quiet mornings, in tears, in groans, in hidden altars no one will ever see. That's where God builds prophets. That's where He trains intercessors. That's where He forms shepherds and messengers and leaders. Not in Bible school, not in stages, not in podcasts, in caves, in closets, in corners of surrender where the only eyes on you are His. So maybe your current season feels like nothing is happening. But what if the most important thing in your life is happening right now, and you just can't see it yet? What if God is writing your message, not with words, but with wounds? What if He is forming you for a future that requires this very silence, this very pain, this very endurance? Don't waste your wilderness. Don't fight the cave. Don't resist the silence. These are not interruptions, they are invitations. God is not punishing you. He's preparing you. And what He builds in private, no one can destroy in public. In the next part, we'll bring this journey full circle. We'll explore how to remain rooted in the secret place, how to discern the season you're in, and how to walk with God when the spotlight finally comes, so that what you built with Him in the dark is never lost in the light. Eventually, the silence breaks, the waiting lifts, the doors open, the room fills, people start to notice. The calling you carried in secret for years begins to unfold. But now you face a new danger, one far greater than obscurity. Now you face exposure, recognition, applause. And the real test becomes this: will you still live for the one who saw you when no one else did? Because the same God who formed you in private will require that you remain anchored to that hidden place, even when the world pulls at your name. Many are elevated by their gifting, only to collapse under the weight of exposure. Not because they were evil, but because they were disconnected from the place that made them usable. When God finally begins to use you, it's not the end of private surrender. It's the beginning of a deeper kind. Now, you must choose secrecy even when fame is offered. Stillness even when busyness is applauded. Obedience even when opportunity knocks louder than conviction. This is the discipline of those who endure. Because the greatest threat to the servant of God is not failure. It is success without presence, visibility without intimacy, influence without brokenness. That's why Jesus often withdrew to lonely places, even at the height of His ministry. That's why He said to pray in secret, give in secret, fast in secret. Because God does not delight in our performance. He desires our heart. If God is using you now or preparing to, don't forget the cave that shaped you. Don't forget the voice that whispered when no one else was listening. Don't abandon the secret place. It's not a season to graduate from. It's a place to return to again and again. That's where your soul is calibrated. That's where your calling is protected. That's where your motives are purified. That's where your heart stays soft. You may think people need your gifts, but God knows you need His voice. The platform cannot sustain what intimacy alone can provide. You cannot live from applause. You must live from presence. Because when the crowd disappears, and it always does, you need a voice that still speaks. When the fruit fades, and it often will, you need a source that never runs dry. Oswald Chambers wrote, "The main thing about Christianity is not the work we do, but the relationship we maintain and the atmosphere produced by that relationship. That atmosphere cannot be manufactured. It is born in hidden places, in early mornings, in open Bibles, in whispered prayers that no one else hears. It is formed in stillness, in obedience, in humility. You don't need to chase visibility. Let your life become so rooted in the secret place that God can trust you anywhere, whether on a stage or in a prison, whether speaking to thousands or sitting in silence, whether you're remembered by men or forgotten. If God knows your name, it is enough. If His voice is near, it is enough. If His presence is with you, that is the reward." So what does it mean to live for the eyes of one? It means walking into a room full of people and still listening for the whisper of God. It means turning down opportunity when the Spirit hasn't said yes. It means rejoicing in hidden obedience as much as in public affirmation. It means never letting what you do replace who you are becoming. It means you would rather disappear in His will than succeed without Him. The world will tell you to build a brand. God will ask you to build an altar. The world will invite you to perform. God will call you to die daily. In the end, your legacy will not be built by how many people knew your name. It will be built by how deeply you knew His. And that knowing will not come through busyness or spotlight. It will come through silence, surrender, and stillness. That is the sacred rhythm of the hidden life. So if you're in the spotlight today, may your heart stay hidden in Christ. If you're in the shadows, may your soul be comforted by His nearness. And if you're still waiting in the unseen places, wondering if God has forgotten you, remember, this is where His greatest work is being done. You are not late. You are not lost. You are being formed. And what He forms in secret, no man can undo. You are not being overlooked. You are being established. Let Him finish what He started. Stay hidden. Stay surrendered. Stay faithful. God's greatest work in you is still happening, even now. Call to action, CTA. If this message spoke to your heart, let it settle. Don't rush past it. Don't treat it as just another video. Return to your secret place. Ask God what He wants to finish in you before He moves through you. And if you're ready to commit to living for the eyes of one, share it in the comments. Say, "I choose the hidden life." That declaration may not trend, but heaven sees it. Like this video if it confirms something you've been sensing in your spirit. Subscribe to Call to Surrender if you're longing for more than surface-level Christianity. And share this with someone who feels forgotten. Maybe this is the reminder they need. God sees you. He is working, and He is not finished. Let the secret place become your strength again. That's where revival always begins.